Good evening, gospel revolutionaries around this whole world. I really appreciate you joining me here in the room of rooms, as it has come to be known. Thank you so much. A seed shall serve him, and it shall be counted for a generation. Psalms 22:30. A seed shall serve him, and it shall be counted for a generation. I'm already happy. As you know, we could not get through this study on the term generation without going back to the Hebrew Scriptures, where it all began, where everything has to be verified, validated. If you believe anything that is not validated by the Hebrew Scriptures, it truly is just a belief. It is not knowledge. Knowledge of the Lord comes from the Hebrew Scriptures. Everything even that Jesus accomplished is validated by the Hebrew Scriptures. Everything that is because the Hebrew Scriptures said that's the way it was going to be. Those who avoid the Hebrew Scriptures are avoiding having their teachings examined closely. We invite you to examine our doctrine, our teaching, and examine it closely. Please question us about it. Ask us. You might be able to correct us about something that needs to be corrected. A seed shall serve him, and it shall be counted for a generation. Well, this term generation, of course, is producing way more than I ever thought it had in it. And of course, when we look at this term about the seed, we know who the seed was. The seed was Jesus Christ, and he was the seed of Abraham, and the promise of Abraham. Not the promises, the promise, and not to the seeds, but seed. That needs to be shouted around the world because there's a lot of fake-ianity going on about healing and blessing and all of these things. And we were blessed with righteousness. There's only one promise, only one promise, only one seed, and that was Christ, and the promise is righteousness. Ooh, that just feels good from head to toe. A seed shall serve him, but it gets counted for a whole generation. In fact, the generation, this is spoken by David. I mean, this is just funny, folks. I mean, this is where the 1,000-year reign began. And David is speaking about the culmination of the reign of the Christ. And David was this beginning of the Genesis in this particular line. Honey, we've got so many things to show you now in the Genesis of Christ and where the Christ begins in a line or a thought, or in the beginning was the Word. John chapter 1 shows us a Genesis of Christ, a Genesis of the Christ. And the power of that, in that the Genesis of the Christ as the Word. But there's many, many things that are Christ in the origins all the way up to the cross, in the culmination of all things. A seed shall serve him. That's Christ. But what Jesus did will be counted, credited for an entire generation. In fact, we find out later on, it's a generation that will never, ever end. You know, I should just shut it down right now at 4 minutes and 31 seconds. Because if you got nothing else but this, you got more than you got all day Sunday in church for sure. Psalms 102, verse 18. This shall be written for the generation to come. You see, David knew this generation was going to come. that the culmination of the 1,000-year reign was going to result in a generation that would never end. There was two sets of 14 generations that led up to the 1,000, that included the 1,000-year reign. I believe that's right. From David to the carrying away and the carrying away to Christ. 14 and 14. I've read several things that has confirmed that the 40 years is a generation according to the scriptures. I read two while I was doing the research, and God said, "For this generation has grieved me. For 40 years, this generation has grieved me." And another one also makes reference to that generation of 40 years that were trapped in the wilderness. And in fact, it says that God, now that circle in the wilderness for 40 years was not something, a happenstance. That's something God sentenced them to. That was planned before, that they would spend 40 years in the desert. And when he says that generation, that those people would wander in the wilderness for 40 years, long before it ever happened, he said it would be for a generation. And that turned out to be 40 years. And then also said that generation grieved him. So I think that we are safe in settling in on 40 years. If we need to arrange that or rearrange that or other information comes in, please let me know. We're always open to whatever needs to change. And again, Psalms 102, verse 18, "This shall be written for the generation to come, and to the people which shall be created shall praise the Lord." I thought people had already been created. No, David knew that at the end of the 1,000-year reign, a new generation, a new creation was on the way. Oh my. This is the last of the fulfillment of the from where that God spoke, and before the foundation of the world, and the word, let there be light. Also Abraham and Jacob and all of these, Adam and all of this resulted and culminated in the Christ. And that is Yeshua Christ. They call him Jesus. "This shall be written for this generation to come." What generation was he talking about? What was David speaking about? "This shall be written for the generation to come, and the people which shall be created." Not born, created. That's why we call this a new creation. The whole thing, folks, what you are now was never on earth before. I'm going to get all excited here. Just listen. This is for a generation of people that shall be created, and they'll all praise the Lord. It's kind of like every knee shall bow and every tongue confess, because it doesn't make any difference when you get it. You're eventually going to understand it. And the reason you're going to bow, reason everybody's going to bow, reason everybody's going to praise the Lord is because eventually everybody's going to know this. And that they were already made righteous and holy through the blood sacrifice of Jesus Christ. The conditional love that Christ made with the Father, and then giving that and passing that love on to us, is so powerful. And as Pat Salonen helped us to understand, and that we became that thing, we became that love. Everything that was a what became a who, and the who became you. Dr. Zeus all over again, right? So, goodness, I could read this to you many, many times, but what I suggest is that you just play this over many, many times rather than me doing that to you. Then Ecclesiastes 1:4. "One generation passeth away." You'll see why I want to go into this one. "One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh. but the earth abideth forever. We made reference to that there were somewhere around a dozen references in the Hebrew scriptures about this earth never going to be destroyed. And I wanted to throw this one in there because it says a generation passes and another one comes along. But the one thing that's never going to happen is that this earth is ever going to be destroyed. It abideth forever. So all of your end time doctrine is wrong. The end time doctrine is all about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. You've already got two major things here that we could all just go home happy with, right? But let us continue. So we're going to go to Isaiah chapter 53 to learn more about this generation that was going to come. It was prophesied, this generation that you live in, this generation that has been going for 2,000 years. This generation has been going for more than 2,000 years. I remember back when we used to say almost 2,000 years. And now we say more than 2,000 years. So this generation was spoken of, as the psalmist David told us, a seed will serve him, and that one seed will be counted for an entire generation, a generation that would never end. And that was Psalms 22:30. A seed shall serve him, and it shall be counted to the Lord for a generation. Wow. And I'm so glad that we found out what generation that is. That's not just one of these 40-year generations. That's this generation that started that never ends. That seed was powerful, folks. That seed was powerful. Let's look at Isaiah 53, verse 6. You've heard it before. You're going to hear it again. A chapter that is not liked by my mystic friends at all. I've asked them to please explain it. I've addressed them and asked them, please explain it. And the only thing that they will quote out of Isaiah 53 is, for we counted him as stricken and smitten of God. See, I remember seeing one of the little posts, and it's like that. We counted him as stricken and smitten of God. And thanks for playing. The context is that he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. So we're going to start in Isaiah 53. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. And the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. And that word is translated as evil, the fault, the iniquity, the mischief, and the punishment of iniquity and sin. This word is really quite amazing in the Hebrew, avon. It's pronounced A-W-V-O-N-E. The word is A-V-O-N. Avon. And that word means all of that in a bag of chips. It means evil. It means fault. The Lord has laid on him the evil. The Lord has laid on him the iniquity. The Lord has laid on him the mischief, the punishment of iniquity. The Lord has laid on him the sin of us all. He was oppressed. Now, what happened when God laid this all on him? He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. Jesus fulfilled every bit of this. He was taken from prison and from judgment. You know, I went through this, and the the word judgment is here, misfah, and actually the only thing that I can see that this actually means, because it always confused me how he was taken from prison and from judgment. But the reading of this, I think, is best put, he was taken from prison and committed to judgment. And who shall declare his generation? Whose generation? The seed's generation. Who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people was he stricken. He was not stricken for their fallen mindset. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was there any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord. The term pleased means to be pleased with. It means to have pleasure with. It was his favor. That was his desire. The pleasure and the desire of the Lord, the pleasure and the desire. Now, I know that sends a chill up all of our spines. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. And the word bruised means to oppress. It means to smite. It means to crush. It means to beat to pieces. I'm not going to mince the words here. It pleased God to beat him to pieces. He hath put him to grief. And the word grief means great disease, sickness. It's not a good word. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, and he shall prolong his days. Oh my gosh. Are you getting this? How many ways have we been told that the seed would be credited for a whole generation? And here it says, he shall see his seed, and he will prolong his days. And the pleasure of the Lord to beat and smite him, the pleasure of the Lord to beat and smite him will prosper in his hand. Oh my gosh. So this beating that Jesus took, why in the world would God be pleased with this beating? Why would God be pleased with this beating? Because of what would prosper. You know what prosper means? It means everything good, right? He shall see, God shall see, the Father shall see the travail of his soul and shall be satisfied. And the travail means the sorrow, the perverseness. It was a very perverse thing that happened to Jesus. The pain, iniquity, the labor, the wearisome, and the wickedness. For he was made sin that we might be made the righteousness of God. Now, again, that is not, became like we became this new creation. He did not become sin. That word literally means it was like it adhered to him like a leech or like a virus or something. And then when he died, the thing that attached itself to him died also. Trap closed. And then it goes on to say, by his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many. Now this term many shows up many times, and it's the term Rab, R-A-B. And it means everybody. There's no way that this term leaves somebody out. For he shall bear the whole world's iniquity. Therefore, I will divide him a portion with the whole world. So he's saying that in verse 12, he said, I'm going to take this portion and receive that portion with everybody. What Jesus gave will count for everybody. And he shall divide the spoils with, and it says the strong, but again, this word that is autusum actually means the greatest number, by any implication, the most numerous number. It's it's weird to say, but that's the only way I can say it. Because he hath poured out his soul unto death, because he needed them to change their minds. Get off of it. If Jesus Christ died on the cross to change a mindset, he is the biggest failure that ever came to this planet. Jesus Christ came to take away sin. Jesus Christ came to implement righteousness, not reveal righteousness. The gospel reveals righteousness. It's so amazing, these little twists and turns that are gone through, and they say, oh, well, the gospel reveals righteousness. Yes, the gospel didn't come along until after the cross. With the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bare the sins of many, and made intercession for their transgressions. Wow. Folks, if Jesus went through that because of a fallen mindset, Jesus is the biggest failure of any spiritual leader on the face of the earth. If Jesus, though, however, canceled out sin and imputed righteousness, not imputed righteousness, the new creation made us righteous. Imputation of righteousness is what was promised with belief. We didn't believe to get this righteousness. We were made this way. Oh man, that's 22 minutes of good gospel, all brought to you from the Hebrew Scriptures.